My name is Mary Thompson, and this story isn't about miracles that fell from heaven. It's about the ones that walked beside me, barefoot and hungry, with hearts too big for the small world we lived in. Those miracles were my children, my twins Eli and Emma. We lived in a little wooden house on the edge of a forgotten town. It was the kind of place where winters came early, and the wind seemed to carry whispers of prayers that never quite reached heaven. Our roof leaked, our stove coughed more smoke than heat, and our days were measured not by time but by survival. Life hadn't always been that way. There was a time when laughter filled our home, when my husband's voice carried through the walls, and the children played barefoot in the garden without a care. But then came the sickness. It started as a cough that I brushed off as nothing. A simple cold, I thought. But it lingered, then grew. And before I knew it, my strength began to fade like the last light of day. The doctor in town said I needed medicine. Something strong, something we couldn't afford. He looked at me with pity. And when I asked the cost, I remember my heart sinking. The price was more than what I earned in 3 months of work at the laundry. So I smiled, nodded politely, and walked home with tears freezing on my cheeks. That night, as I sat by the window coughing into my sleeve, I tried to hide it from the twins. They were only 12, too young to carry such heavy worries. But children, they see what mothers try to hide. Eli came close and gently touched my hand. "Mom," he said, his voice trembling. "You've been coughing too much, are you sick?" I forced a smile. "It's just a little cold, sweetheart, don't you worry." But Emma wasn't convinced. She had her father's eyes, sharp, searching, impossible to fool. "Mom, we heard the doctor," she said quietly. "We know you need medicine." I froze, my heart ached not from illness, but from the thought of them worrying. So I said the only thing I could. "I'll be fine, my loves, God takes care of us." But deep down I was afraid. Afraid of what would happen if he didn't. Days passed and the snow grew thicker. The twins continued going to school every morning, walking down that long, icy road in their worn-out boots, their laughter echoing faintly behind them. I tried to keep things normal, warm soup on the stove, a story by candlelight before bed, and whispered prayers when they were asleep. But my body was growing weaker. Some days I couldn't stand long enough to finish laundry. Some nights I woke up gasping for breath. I didn't tell them how bad it was, but they knew. One morning I found Emma sitting by the window, staring out at the snow. Her school books were open, but her eyes weren't on them. Eli sat beside her, silent. I walked over and asked gently, "What's wrong, my darlings?" They looked at each other, and then Eli spoke. "Mom, we've been thinking." He hesitated. "What if we stop going to school for a while?" I froze. "Stop school? Why would you ever do that?" Emma's voice cracked. "So we can work. Mr. Keller at the store needs helpers. If we both help him, we can earn enough to buy your medicine." For a moment I couldn't speak. My heart felt like it was breaking open. "Sweethearts," I whispered, "you can't give up school. Your education is your future." But Eli shook his head. "You're our future, Mom. We don't need anything if we don't have you." Those words shattered me. I tried to protest, to tell them no, to be the strong mother they needed. But when I saw the determination in their eyes, I realized they'd already made up their minds. That night after they went to bed, I cried quietly into my hands. The house was silent, except for the faint crackle of the fire and the whisper of the wind outside. And for the first time I prayed not for healing, but for strength. For my children to have enough light in their hearts to carry what I could not. The next morning I watched from the window, as they walked down the road not with school bags, but with little lunch pails. Their shoulders were small, but they stood tall, like soldiers marching toward a battle they didn't deserve. The sun rose behind them, turning their breath into clouds of gold against the cold air. And as I watched them disappear down the hill, I felt both pride and pain tear through me. They were my angels, and they were giving up their wings for me. That day was the beginning of their sacrifice. A story that would change our lives forever. It was the winter we almost gave up. But instead, we found something far greater than hope. We found love that could not be measured in money. And faith that could not be destroyed by pain. And though I didn't know it then, that winter would be the one that showed me just how far a mother's heart and her children's could stretch before breaking. It's strange how quietly sacrifice begins. No grand speeches, no lightning from the heavens. Just two children, rising before dawn with determination in their eyes. That morning, the house was colder than ever. The fire had gone out during the night, and frost painted lace on the windows. I could hear the soft creak of the floorboards as Eli and Emma tiptoed through the kitchen. I lay in bed pretending to sleep. But I could hear the whispers of their tiny voices. "Don't wake Mom," Emma said softly. "She'll worry again." "I packed some bread," Eli replied. "We can share it at lunchtime." There was a pause, then the sound of the door creaking open. And the whisper of cold air rushing in. And just like that, my children were off to work. Not to school. Not to play. But to earn money to save my life. Later that day, when I gathered the courage to walk to the store, I saw them, my twins, through the frosted window of Mr. Keller's grocery. They were so small behind the counter. Eli carrying boxes that looked twice his size. And Emma carefully stacking jars with trembling hands. Mr. Keller, the old storekeeper, looked at me with kind eyes when I walked in. He knew. Everyone in our small town knew. "Mary," he said quietly, "you should be resting." I smiled weakly. "I'm just checking on the kids, they shouldn't be working this hard." He looked toward them and then back at me. "Those two," he said softly, "they wouldn't take no for an answer. They said they'll work until they can buy what their mama needs." His words hit me deep. I felt both shame and pride woven together like a knot in my chest. When I tried to take them home, Eli shook his head stubbornly. "Please, Mom," he whispered. "Just let us do this." And somehow I couldn't say no. The days turned into weeks. The twins worked before and after school hours, sweeping floors, carrying deliveries, and running errands for the townsfolk. Sometimes they came home so tired they could barely eat dinner. I tried to make things easier. Hot soup, soft bread, and warm blankets waiting when they returned. But inside I was falling apart. The medicine I needed cost more than $50. An impossible amount for children earning a few coins a day. Yet every night, Eli would open a little tin box he kept under his pillow and count the coins carefully, whispering numbers like prayers. Emma would watch him with hope in her eyes. "How much more, Eli?" And he'd smile faintly. "We're getting closer, Em, we just have to keep going." I never told them that they were still far from the goal. I couldn't take away that light they carried. Winter deepened. The wind outside howled like a lost soul, and the snow piled high enough to swallow the fence posts. There were nights when I thought we wouldn't make it through. One night I woke to find Emma crawling into my bed, her tiny hands freezing. She pressed close and whispered, "Mom, are you sure you'll be okay?" I hesitated, then brushed her hair from her face. "Yes, sweetheart, I just need a little more time." She looked up at me with tears glistening. "Then we'll give you all the time you need." Those words broke something in me. The kind of break that doesn't hurt, it humbles you. It makes you see love not as something fragile, but as something unbreakable, carved from courage. One morning, Eli came running into the house. His cheeks red from the cold, his breath short. "Mom," he shouted, "Mr. Keller gave us a bonus, he said we worked harder than grown-ups." Emma followed, clutching a few folded bills in her mittened hands. It wasn't much, but to them it was gold. They placed it in my lap, smiling like they had just conquered the world. "Now you can buy your medicine, Mom," Emma said proudly. Tears filled my eyes before I could speak. I pulled them close, my heart bursting with both love and guilt. "My darlings," I whispered, "you shouldn't be the ones carrying this." But Eli shook his head. You carried us since we were born, Mum. Now it's our turn. That night I sat by the fireplace long after they fell asleep. I looked at their peaceful faces. 2 angels sleeping side by side under a single worn quilt. Their hands were rough from work. Their clothes smelled of flour and dust from the store. I realized then that life had already taken so much from them. Their childhood, their ease, their dreams. And yet it had given them something few ever find. The purest form of love. I reached out and tucked the blanket tighter around them. Then whispered into the stillness of the night, Lord, if you take me tomorrow, please. Don't take their hope. The next morning something changed. The town doctor stopped by unexpectedly. He had heard about the twins. How 2 little children were working every day to save their mother. He sat by my bedside and said softly, Mary, sometimes heaven moves through the hands of little ones. You're a blessed woman. Then he handed me a small paper bag. Inside were the medicines, the same ones I couldn't afford. Doctor, I can't pay for this, I stammered. He smiled, you already have. 2 angels paid in full with their love. I broke down in tears. For the first time in months, I felt the weight lift off my chest, not just the sickness but the helplessness. When Eli and Emma came home that evening, I showed them the medicine and told them what the doctor had done. They cried not from sadness but relief. Emma threw her arms around me. See, Mom, I told you God listens. Eli smiled through tears. We promised you'd get better, and we keep our promises. That night, as snow fell silently outside, I realized something I would carry for the rest of my life. Sometimes love doesn't need miracles. It is the miracle. The medicine helped. Within a week, my cough began to ease, and the darkness that had been pressing on my chest finally began to lift. The nights grew a little warmer. I could breathe without pain, walk without trembling, and smile without pretending. The twins watched me carefully. Every spoonful of soup I finished. Every deep breath I took. Their eyes followed me like sunlight following the morning mist. But even as I got better, I noticed something else. Something that troubled me. Eli and Emma looked tired. Not the kind of tired that a good night's sleep could fix, but the kind that came from carrying too much on small shoulders. Their cheeks were pale, their hands rough and red from the cold, and though they smiled when I looked their way, I could see the heaviness behind those smiles, a quiet exhaustion that no child should ever know. One afternoon, when the snow had melted enough for me to step outside, I walked to the store to bring them some soup. The bell above the door chimed softly as I entered. Mr. Keller looked up from the counter, surprised to see me. Mary, he said warmly, you're up and about, praise the Lord. I smiled faintly, thanks to you and to them. I looked toward the back, where Eli was stacking boxes, while Emma scrubbed the floor with a rag too big for her small hands. They looked smaller than I remembered, as if the weight of the world had pressed them down a little shorter. I called out gently, Eli, Emma, come take a break. They looked up, startled and happy, and ran to me, wiping their hands on their aprons. I opened the thermos of soup and poured it into 2 tin cups. The smell of chicken and herbs filled the air, and for a moment their tired faces softened into joy. But when I handed Eli his cup, I noticed the bandages on his fingers. Small cuts and scrapes, angry and raw. What happened? I asked softly. He shrugged, just from carrying boxes, Mom, it's nothing. Emma quickly added, he wouldn't let me help, said they were too heavy for me. I sighed, trying to hold back tears. They were too young to know what sacrifice really meant. But they were living it every day. That night, as I watched them sleeping again by the fire, I realized that love can be as heavy as it is beautiful. It carries joy, yes, but it also carries pain. And sometimes those who love the deepest hurt the most. I prayed quietly. Lord, they've done enough, let me be strong now, let me carry them again. The following week, I insisted the twins take a few days off work. They protested, of course. But Mom, Eli said, Mr. Keller needs us. And we still need to save for more medicine, Emma added. I smiled softly. The doctor said I'm recovering well. No more medicine for now, just rest. And that means it's your turn to rest too. They exchanged looks, unsure whether to believe me. But when I made them hot chocolate and brought out an old book we used to read together, I saw a spark return to their eyes. For the first time in months. We sat by the fire, laughing, reading and being just us. A family. Still, the winter wasn't kind. Even though my body was healing. Our lives remained fragile, like thin glass that could shatter with one wrong move. Work had been scarce for everyone that season. Mr. Keller's store was struggling. And he couldn't afford to keep paying the twins for long. He came to our house one evening. His hat in hand, his face heavy with regret. Mary, he said, I hate to say this, but I'll have to let the children go for now. Business is slow, I can't pay them till spring. I felt the air leave my chest. Not because of the money, but because I knew how hard they'd worked to earn that place. Eli and Emma stood quietly behind me listening. They didn't cry, they just nodded. It's okay, Mr. Keller, Eli said softly. Thank you for letting us help. After he left, I looked at them and asked, Are you upset? Emma shook her head. No, Mom. We got what we needed. You're better now, that's all that matters. But as the days went by, I could see a shadow fall over them. Without school or work, they seemed lost. Children who had grown used to carrying burdens often forget how to simply be children. They spent their days wandering the fields, collecting firewood or watching the sky from the porch steps. Sometimes I'd hear Eli whisper to Emma, I wish Dad were here, he'd know what to do. Those words strung not because they were wrong, but because I wished it too. Their father had passed away 2 years before. An accident at the mill that changed our lives forever. Since then, I had tried to be both mother and father. But some voids are too deep for one person to fill. One afternoon, as I folded laundry by the fire, I heard laughter outside. The kind of pure, unguarded laughter I hadn't heard in so long. I stepped onto the porch and saw the twins building something in the snow. It wasn't a snowman this time. It was a snow angel. They were shaping wings with their hands, patting the snow gently like they were afraid to break it. When they noticed me watching, Emma called out, Look, Mom, it's you, you're our snow angel. I laughed through tears. Oh, my darlings, that's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Eli smiled. We made her so we never forget how lucky we are. I covered my mouth trying to hold back sobs. In that moment, under the fading winter sun, I realized that even in hardship, beauty still finds a way to bloom. That night, as we sat together by the fire, Eli asked suddenly, Mom, do you ever think about what happens after people die? I hesitated. Why do you ask? He looked into the flames. Because I think when people love each other that much, they don't really go away. They just stay close like light. I reached over and held his hand. That's right, sweetheart. Love never leaves, it just changes form. That winter was the hardest one we ever lived through. Not because of the cold outside, but because of the truths it brought inside our hearts. We learned that strength isn't about not breaking. It's about breaking gently and still choosing to love anyway. And even though we didn't know it yet, our story wasn't done. Because sometimes the deepest trials are only the middle of a miracle. Winter finally began to loosen its grip. The snow that once buried our little home began to melt into soft trickles down the hill. And the air that used to bite my skin now carried the scent of wet soil and new beginnings. Spring had come, quietly, gently, like an old friend who didn't want to wake you too soon. I remember standing outside that first warm morning. The wind brushing against my face like a blessing. The ground was still soft, and puddles shimmered where the snow had been. I could hear the faint sound of birds returning. Tiny, brave voices singing as if winter had never existed. After all we had been through. It felt like God was giving us a second chance. A season not just for the earth to heal, but for our hearts to breathe again. Eli and Emma came running down the small slope behind our house. Their boots splashing through puddles, laughter echoing through the valley. It had been months since I'd heard that sound. Real laughter, not the tired kind that hides behind worry. They looked so alive under the golden light. Their cheeks flushed, their eyes sparkling with life. "Mom, the creek's flowing again," Emma shouted. "It's full of frogs, eh?" Eli grinned, and we saw a fox by the fence. He looked at us like he remembered us from last year. I smiled, my heart swelling with a warmth I hadn't felt in so long. It wasn't just the season that had changed. Something inside them, inside us, had begun to bloom again. In spring, even the smallest miracles can feel like the greatest blessings. Mr. Keller reopened his store fully once the roads cleared. When he saw me walking through town again, he came out with open arms. "Well, if it is Mary Thompson," he laughed. "I was starting to think you'd hibernate like the bears." I smiled, almost did, but the twins wouldn't let me. He looked down the street where Eli and Emma were helping unload supplies from a wagon. "They're good kids, Mary, the kind the world doesn't make much anymore." I nodded softly. "They saved my life, Mr. Keller, in more ways than one." He reached into his pocket and handed me a small envelope. "Just a little something from the townsfolk," he said. "Don't argue, it's not charity, it's love." Inside were a few bills and a note signed by half the people in town. They had all chipped in a little, enough to help us get by until I could work again. I cried right there in the street. Not from sadness, but from gratitude. The kind that humbles you until all you can do is whisper thank you to the sky. By late March, I had started taking in sewing again. Old dresses, torn coats, mended trousers. Each stitch felt like a thread pulling us closer back to normal life. Eli helped me cut fabric while Emma learned to use the needle. Sometimes they'd bicker about who made straighter seams. But it was all in laughter now, not in worry. One evening, as we sat by the table, the sun setting pink and gold through the window. Eli said, "Mom, maybe one day we can open our own shop. You could sew and we could help. We could call it the Three Hearts Tailor Shop." Emma giggled, "Only if I get to do the buttons, you always mess them up, Eli." Their playful argument filled the house like music. It was such a simple sound, but it felt like grace itself. The next morning I woke early to make breakfast. When I opened the door to fetch firewood, I saw something hanging from the porch railing. A small wicker basket covered with a cloth. Inside was a loaf of bread, a jar of honey, and a note that read, "For the family that taught us all what love really means." There was no name. No one ever came forward to say who left it. But I didn't need to know. Because sometimes kindness doesn't need a name, it just needs a heart. The days grew longer, and so did the smiles in our home. I started walking to town with the twins every morning. Watching the world bloom again. The cherry blossoms along the fence. The fresh smell of rain-soaked earth. The laughter of children running home from school. One afternoon, we stopped by the old church at the end of the street. It was small, with peeling paint and a cracked bell that hadn't rung in years. But that day the door was open. Inside, the pastor, old Reverend Jacobs, was sweeping the floor. He smiled when he saw us. "Well, bless my soul, the Thompsons, come in, come in." He hadn't seen me since the winter. So when he noticed how healthy I looked, he clapped his hands together and said, "Miracles sure come in twos, or in your case, threes." We laughed, and the twins helped him dust the pews. By the time we left, the bell rang for the first time in months. Its sound echoed over the fields. A slow, steady chime that felt like it was announcing our rebirth. That night I wrote in my old journal, the one I used to keep before life grew too hard. I wrote, "Today I saw the world in colour again. I saw my children smile without fear. I saw kindness where I least expected it. Maybe healing isn't just about getting better. Maybe it's about believing that tomorrow can be beautiful again." A few weeks later, something else changed. Something I didn't expect. The twins' teacher, Miss Allen, came to visit. She was young and full of energy, with kind eyes that always sparkled when she talked about her students. "Mary," she said gently, "Eli and Emma haven't been in school for months. But I'd like to invite them back. We can help them catch up." I hesitated, afraid they'd fallen too far behind. But before I could speak, Emma jumped up and hugged her. "We'd love to come back," she said, eyes shining. Eli nodded proudly. "We'll study extra hard, we promise." Their first day back, I watched from the window as they walked down the road. School bags on their backs again, just like before all the pain began. The morning sun glowed behind them, casting two long shadows that stretched side by side, almost as if holding hands. And in that moment, I realized something profound. The hardest winters make the sweetest springs. Because when you've known what it means to almost lose everything, you learn how to truly cherish what remains. That evening, when they returned from school, Emma was bubbling with stories about her friends and lessons, while Eli proudly showed me his writing notebook filled with neat, careful lines. "Look, Mom," he said with a grin, "I wrote about you for our essay. The strongest person I know." I pretended to scold him playfully. "Oh, I'm not that strong." But he shook his head. "Yes, you are. You taught us that even when things fall apart, love can hold them together." And just like that, with a child's simple truth, the whole room seemed to glow with something sacred. Spring wasn't about big miracles for us. It was about small ones, the kind that come quietly, that hide in laughter, in bread left on a porch, in lessons learned through tears. We didn't have much, but we had each other. And that, I realized, was more than enough. The morning after the storm felt different. The air smelled of wet soil and mango leaves, and the clouds drifted away slowly, as if the heavens had been washed clean. Mary woke up to the sound of the twins whispering. Their small voices carried the kind of excitement she hadn't heard in months. When she turned her head on the thin pillow, she saw them sitting near the doorway, their backs against each other, writing something on old scraps of paper. "Eli, what are you doing?" she asked softly. He looked up with his shy smile, the one that always made her heart melt. "We're writing letters, Mama," he said. "Letters?" "To God," Anna answered without looking up. "Eli said that even if people don't see us, God does, so we're writing to him about you." Mary sat up slowly, her chest tightened with emotion. "What did you write?" Anna looked at her paper. Her handwriting was crooked but careful. "I told him that you're sick and we need medicine. I said we already gave up school so he doesn't need to ask us to give up more, but I also said, if he wants, we'll do more." Eli added quietly, "I told him I'll find a way to make you better, even if I have to walk to the city." Mary couldn't speak. Her throat burned and tears blurred her sight. She pulled them both into her arms and held them tightly. "You two are my heart," she whispered, "my little miracles." They didn't know it, but that morning marked the beginning of something extraordinary. That same day, Eli decided to go to the nearby town to look for work. He had heard that the old bakery at the end of the street was reopening. The owner, Mr. Tom, was a kind man, though strict. When Eli reached there, barefoot and tired, he stood by the back door, too shy to enter. He watched as Mr. Tom kneaded dough, his hands thick with flour. "Can I help you, boy?" the man asked without turning around. Eli swallowed hard. "Sir, I can work, I can clean or carry flour, I don't need much pay, just a little money to buy medicine for my mother." Mr. Tom looked up, wiping his hands. "How old are you?" 11, Eli answered, trying to stand taller. Mr. Tom's face softened. 11, and you're already trying to feed your family, he sighed. "All right then, you can help after school hours." Eli lowered his head. "I don't go to school anymore, sir." That silence that followed was long and heavy. Mr. Tom didn't speak right away. He just looked at Eli, really looked at him, and then slowly nodded. "All right, boy, come tomorrow, you'll start early." Meanwhile, Anna stayed home to care for their mother. She washed the clothes, swept the tiny yard, and tried her best to make soup out of whatever she could find, mostly rice water and a few herbs. At night, when Eli returned with tired feet and hands covered in flour, he always brought a small piece of bread for Anna and their mother. Mr. Tom said this one's for the angels, he'd say with a grin. Mary would pretend not to cry as she tore the bread into 3 pieces. It wasn't much, but somehow it felt like a feast. Weeks turned into months. Eli kept working, and soon Mr. Tom grew fond of the boy. He taught him how to bake properly, how to knead dough, how to light the old oven, and even how to decorate the loaves with little leaf patterns. One afternoon Mr. Tom asked, "Eli, how's your mother doing?" "She's better, sir, but still weak." Mr. Tom nodded. "I've been thinking I know a doctor in the city, a good one. If you can bring your mother next week, I'll pay for the consultation. Consider it my gift." Eli's eyes widened. "You do that, sir?" The man smiled. "A mother who raised a boy like you deserves all the help she can get." Eli ran home that evening, tears of joy streaming down his face. "Anna, Mama," he shouted before he even reached the door. "We're going to the doctor. Mr. Tom said he'll help us." Mary looked at him in disbelief. "Eli, child, you're joking." "No, Mama, he means it." She sat back down, trembling. After all this time, God really heard us. Anna whispered, "He read our letters." The next week they made the trip to the city in Mr. Tom's old truck. The hospital was large and shining, full of white walls and strange smells. Mary was afraid at first. She had never been to such a place before. But the doctor, a gentle woman named Dr. Evelyn, treated her kindly. After the checkup, she said softly, "You're lucky you came now. It's serious, but we can treat it. You'll need some rest and proper food. No more skipping meals." Mary smiled weakly. "We'll try, Doctor." Dr. Evelyn glanced at the twins. "You two must take care of her. She's your treasure." Eli and Anna nodded together. As they left the hospital, the twins held their mother's hands. For the first time in months, she looked up at the sky and saw colour again. The blue seemed deeper, the sun warmer. "See," Anna whispered, "God doesn't forget." Mary smiled through her tears. "No, sweetheart, he just waits for the right time to answer." That night back home, as they sat together eating warm bread, Mary said, "You both gave up your dreams for me. I will never forget that." Eli shook his head. "We didn't give up, Mama, we just waited. One day we'll go back to school, but for now this was the lesson we had to learn." Anna added softly, "Love is more important than books." Mary looked at them, her 2 angels, and whispered a prayer of thanks. The miracle had begun, though none of them knew just how far it would reach. Because in that same bakery, a newspaper reporter would soon walk in, taste the bread that Eli made, and ask to write about the little boy baker who worked to save his mother. And that story would change their lives forever. When Eli opened the bakery door the next morning, he never imagined how one small act of kindness could ripple into something so big. The air still smelled of fresh bread and cinnamon. He wiped his hands on his apron and greeted the man standing near the counter, a tall stranger holding a notepad. "You're the boy who bakes here?" the man asked kindly. Eli nodded shyly. "Yes, sir." "I read about you from a customer yesterday," the man said. "They told me you work to buy medicine for your sick mother." He smiled. "My name's Mr. Grant. I write stories for the local newspaper. I'd like to share yours if that's all right." Eli's eyes widened. "You want to write about us?" Mr. Grant nodded. "The world needs to hear stories like yours, son, real stories of love and sacrifice." Eli hesitated, looking toward Mr. Tom, who stood nearby. The baker smiled proudly. "Go on, lad, tell him your story." And so he did. Eli told him everything, how he and Anna gave up school, how they worked and prayed, how kind strangers helped them when the world had turned its back. The man listened quietly, his pen still, his heart full. Before leaving, he shook Eli's hand. "You remind me of hope, boy. You and your sister, you're proof that love still lives in this world." A week later, everything changed. The newspaper headline read, "Little twins who gave up school to save their mother, a story of courage and faith." The article spread faster than anyone expected. People in the nearby towns read it over breakfast and wept. Shopkeepers clipped it to their doors. School teachers read it aloud to their students. And one morning, a car stopped in front of their small home. A woman stepped out, elegant, smiling, with eyes full of kindness. "Are you Eli and Anna?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am," Anna said shyly. The woman knelt down and held their hands. "My name is Mrs. Dawson. I run a charity for children. I read your story and I came to help." Mary, weak but standing, came out from the doorway. You came all the way here for us. Mrs. Dawson nodded. Your children reminded me of something I'd forgotten, that love can move mountains. I'd like to sponsor their education. They'll go back to school, and we'll make sure you get the treatment you need. Mary covered her mouth, trembling. Oh my Lord, I don't know what to say. Eli spoke softly, eyes bright. Say thank you, Mama, that's what you always taught us. Mrs. Dawson smiled through tears. Yes, dear, just say thank you. Life began to change slowly after that. Eli and Anna returned to school, their books new, their shoes clean, their hearts still humble. Every day after class, they still visited Mr. Tom's bakery, helping him knead the dough or sweep the floor. Mary regained her strength, her smile returning like sunlight after a long storm. She started sewing again, making little aprons for the bakery boys and dresses for the local children. Mr. Tom often joked, if love could be baked into bread, these two would feed the world. And maybe, in a way, they already did. Years passed. Eli grew tall and strong. He studied hard, earning a scholarship to culinary school. He became a baker like Mr. Tom, only now his bakery carried a name written in gentle script above the door. Anna and Mama's Bread of Hope. He refused to sell the bread for profit. Instead, he opened the bakery every Sunday to feed the poor for free. Anna, too, grew into a kind young woman. She studied medicine, just like the doctor who once helped their mother, and in every patient she treated, she saw a bit of the miracle that once saved them. Mary lived to see it all. She sat by the window of their small but beautiful home, often smiling as she watched her children laugh and work. Do you remember, Mama, Anna said one evening, when we wrote letters to God? Mary laughed softly. How could I forget? You asked him not to take me away, remember? Eli grinned. Guess he read them after all. Mary looked at both of them, her eyes shining. He didn't just read them, my loves, he answered them in ways we could never imagine. One afternoon, the family visited Mr. Tom, who was now older and slower. They brought him a loaf of their own bread, soft, golden and warm. Mr. Tom broke it in half and smiled. You've both done well, your mother must be proud. Mary smiled. I'm more than proud, I'm grateful. Mr. Tom nodded thoughtfully. You know what I've learned, sometimes the hardest roads are the ones that lead us home. Mary reached over and held his hand. Yes, and sometimes kindness is the map that gets us there. That night, as the sun melted into the horizon, Mary wrote a small note and pinned it on the bakery wall beside the old newspaper article. It read, We once gave up school to buy our mother medicine. But what we gained was far greater, faith, kindness and love. Never believe that sacrifice is loss. For when done with love, it becomes a seed. And one day, that seed grows into a miracle. A moral of the story. The truest wealth is not found in money or success, but in the love that survives every hardship. The twins gave up their dreams not to lose them, but to teach the world that when you give with a pure heart, God multiplies what little you have into everything you need. Love and sacrifice are never wasted. They are the footprints that lead us back to miracles.